To all. It is our pleasure to welcome you to today's Euro-Mediterranean Economist Association webinar discussion on blue carbon frontiers, financing innovation for the Mediterranean climate shield. As we are here today, we are all reminded of the vital importance of the shared mission that we all have, which is in fact to protect and restore unique and very much fragile ecosystem through innovative and sustainable financing solutions. Of course, nowadays, finance has to be really put to the service of the planet and to the service of the people to ensure that we are living in a planet that allows us to be, of course, connected, but also overall healthy. Because, of course, we, as humans, we cannot, in fact, survive if our planet is not healthy. So we cannot be healthy. The Mediterranean region, with its very rich biodiversity ecosystems and critical, I would say, role in the overall, actually in the overall planet, is extremely in a pivotal juncture. It has been clearly said that the Mediterranean is in a hotspot. It has been there since many years. The research, the scientific research has shown clearly how the Mediterranean Sea and all the countries around the Mediterranean Sea will suffer a global warming and will suffer all the degradations that we're seeing from an environmental standpoint. So, in fact, the dual challenges that we are experiencing nowadays, and I think it is clear to all of us, the science has already been extremely clear about it, that we are living climate change, threat of climate change everywhere in the Mediterranean, be it in the north or in the south, and in the Mediterranean itself, and also environmental degradation, which will in fact threaten, it's a real threat for ecological integrity, but also overall in the livelihood and cultural heritage of millions and millions of people who depend on those resources, fisheries, lands. So if we have a global warming and we have huge acidification of the oceans, then there is a big problem that we have to deal with. And I am not sure these problems or these events are insurable anymore. I think there is a limit for insurance and reinsurance, and nowadays we see those limits. Now, today we would like to delve into the concept of blue carbon, which is the carbon captured and stored by marine and coastal ecosystems, such as, for example, mangroves, seagrass, salt marshes, and other species that we even ignore from that they are capturing carbon. So we need, of course, to advance the research as much as possible to allow us to better understand the services that are provided by the Mediterranean and overall ocean ecosystems to help mitigate the climate change challenges that we are living, and particularly the biodiversity degradation. Now, those ecosystems that we would like to delve into are not only crucial for biodiversity, but also for their capacity to act as carbon sinks and also playing a real role in mitigating this climate change. So it's really, I would say, a clear link between which are the ecosystems that we have. So we need to define those ecosystems, their services that they are providing, value those services that they provide as part of what we call a collective nature capital. And all of this will allow us to eventually, if we have the time, to mitigate a climate change. Now, our discussion today practically will focus on exploring those frontiers of carbon, blue carbon innovation and financial mechanisms that are in our disposal today or not. Because, of course, finance is an evolving industry, and for sure there will be financial innovation to deal with all of this. And all of this will work together in a sustainable, inclusive, and transparent and responsible way to ensure that these efforts will yield to value for our people and for the planet. So we will try to examine today a little bit how we can leverage new technologies, create robust financial models that are not threatening financial stability, but also they are complying with the rules of sustainability, but also foster the collaborations between the public and the private sectors, and also the philanthropic sector to enhance the blue carbon initiatives in the Mediterranean, not only to make money, I think viability is important, but also to enhance sustainability and to ensure that we are dealing with the biodiversity degradation and then dealing with mitigating climate change, but at the same time, remaining into the ethical, I would say, frontier, which in fact, we need to, all of us understand to ensure this responsibility component that we all are responsible for. Then we will also try to share insights of latest developments in the blue carbon science, innovative financing strategies with our experts today. And eventually, if anybody has some case studies that we could leverage on, but case studies that are successful and they could be upscaled over time. Before I begin our webinar today and give the floor to our experts, I would like to thank very much our collaborators, co-organizers of this webinar, Union for Mediterranean and the Centre Scientifique de Monaco for their help and their commitment for this important cause for the Mediterranean. So I think now we could start striving really to work together to ensure that this objective is achieved. Of course, we do not have time. Every year is 1 year less. And every year we are not complying with the climate goal or Paris targets. It's a year less, and then more effort to be done to ensure that we are reaching our purpose. Without further ado, I would like to give the floor directly to our first speaker and friend, Nathalie Helmi. Nathalie, she is the section head of environmental economics at the Centre Scientifique de Monaco. Nathalie, she's also a member of the advisory board of the Euro-Mediterranean Economists Association, so EMEA. And Nathalie also has done a lot of work within the IPCC and within the COP systems to really push toward this importance of the services, ecosystemic services in the Mediterranean. And beyond that, she has really worked for many years on those topics. So without further ado, Nathalie, it's a pleasure to have you with us today. Thank you. I know that you have been traveling a lot those days. I know that you've been from conference to conference on the oceans, really trying to disseminate the research, the great research that you guys are doing in Centre Scientifique de Monaco. And I'm extremely happy and honored to have you today with us, and also to have this collaboration with the Centre Scientifique de Monaco, with the EMEA, and with you personally to really work together on a system that is sustainable, inclusive, transparent, and responsible for our Mediterranean, particularly the oceans in our Mediterranean, from an oceans perspective, but also from a land perspective. But again, now today we are focusing on the blue aspect of it. So, Nathalie, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Reem. Hello, everybody. I'm happy to be here. It's an honor for me to present in this webinar. Thank you for inviting me. I have a problem with my computer, so I'm on my phone. If you can share my presentation, I think it will be helpful. I'm sorry.
Yes, you got it. You have your presentation on screen, Nathalie.
Okay, I cannot see it. This is a problem. I don't know. How can I see it? Yes, now I can. Okay, thank you. So I would like to present about marine ecosystems and their services as blue carbon, but also the other co-benefits related with those ecosystems. And they have many other ecosystem services that we should consider. Next slide, please. It is important to study the impact of climate change on our natural capital, like Reem said. Next slide. And in IPCC, it is clear that we are already out of the right track because we have already 1.1 degrees Celsius of increased temperature, and this is really very, very scary because we are not doing well. And next slide, please. If we look at the projections, we can see that most of the scenarios are not good for the future as well. And next slide. Meaning that we are heading to maybe 3.2 degrees Celsius, but in the Mediterranean, it will be maybe 4 degrees Celsius according to the projections. And you can see the impact. It is very visual. The world, it will be very, very warm, and the impact is everywhere. Next slide, please. And what will happen is the impact of nature will be important, but also on human beings, of course, because of the biodiversity loss. Next slide. I wanted to introduce the ecosystem services, and the definition is on the next slide, please. You can see here that the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment since 2006 gave a clear definition of the 4 categories of ecosystem services. Next slide. And we have those categories here, supporting, regulating, provisioning, and cultural ecosystem services. Next slide. If we consider the ocean, it plays a key role in global climate regulation through uptake and storage of heat and carbon dioxide. Next slide. And this is why we consider the blue carbon ecosystems, which are kind of nature-based solutions. And those blue carbon ecosystems can be coastal, but also in the open ocean. Next slide, please. In October 2021, in Monaco, we organized a workshop, and the Prince was here for the conclusion. I want to show you some of the outcomes of the workshop. Next slide, please. We considered first tropical and temperate coastal ecosystems. So we saw that those ecosystems are disappearing, and we are losing a lot because those ecosystems are very important. Next slide, please. So next slide, this is the first category of ecosystem services. And we have here the example of mangroves. And we have some calculations of the ecosystem services they provide to the humanity. And if we look into the 4 categories of ecosystem services, we can see that we have already some valuation that has been done. And the same for the salt marshes. Next slide, please. And this is a calculation that has been already provided for the salt marshes. And then next slide, please. And the seagrass as well on the next slide, please. Thank you. And then I can move to the other category of ecosystem services on the next slide, please. And oh no, we have still the mangrove ecosystem services. I wanted to show you a study that has been published recently. Can you put the next slide, please? And here you can see the different services that the mangroves are rendering to the humanity. It is not only blue carbon, but also other and many other co-benefits. And this is very important. Next slide, please. We have the methodology to calculate those ecosystem services. The calculation can be direct or indirect, and we have different methodologies. IPBS published one study where we can see all the methodologies, they are available. The problem now is to take our numbers to the decision makers and also to the private sector, including finance. Next slide, please. And I wanted also to consider the blue carbon in the open ocean. Next slide. And here you can see the biological carbon pump. This is between the open ocean and the surface to the deep sea, and you can see the carbon which is sequestered in the deep sea. So it is very important. Next slide, please. And here you can see the deep sea ecosystem goods and services, and you can see the different categories. And you can see that the deep sea is very important, not only for carbon sequestration, but also for other co-benefits as well. And this deep sea is threatened by human activities. And next slide, please. I wanted to show you this study where we have an evaluation of the deep sea ecosystem services. Look, all are in million except one, and this one is oil and gas, and this one is calculated in billion, meaning that it is very difficult to convince the policymakers and the industry to stop to go to the deep sea and extract everything from this deep sea. But what we need is to change the paradigm to go from an extractive economy to a regenerative economy. And it is very important to consider all the actors, not only the government, but also the private sector, the industry and the financial institutions. Next slide, please. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Nathalie, for this, I would say, complete overview on the ecosystem services on the ocean side. It's clear that the scientific research is quite rich, and we even have numbers connected to the valuation of those ecosystem services that you clearly mentioned, coming from mangroves, salt marshes, seagrasses, and most probably more species that they are contributing to the stability of our, I would say, planetary systems via the oceans. But then, unfortunately, we are still locked into the extractive economic model, which is there making money, but then in a way, killing us slowly or progressively. And we do not know when, in fact, this is going to really become, I would say, an extreme, very extreme event that we cannot handle anymore. So I mean, I can say that the science is there. What is missing? What is, in your view, missing to have an action and a decisive action to ensure that we are changing this paradigm from extraction to regeneration, but then at the same time to integrate the nature capital, including the ecosystemic services within a coherent and sustainable model that will allow us not only to mitigate climate change, but at the same time to create complete different type of businesses that are anchored in these regenerative principles. What do you think?
I think what is missing is a real will from the decision makers. As I said, not only the political will, but also the private sector. I'm here in London talking about coral reefs, and we are trying to convince the private sector to invest in the protection and the restoration of the coral reefs, but they don't understand why they should do this if there is no return. So this is why I insisted on the ecosystem services, meaning that we can evaluate what those ecosystems are giving us in terms of monetary value, and this is a way to convince them. Also, what we need is maybe more regulation, but I think if we have really the will to change, we can make it.
Thank you very much, Nathalie, and I hope you will join us later on in the group discussion. So we'll see you later. Our next speaker is Giselle Arruda. Giselle, I met Giselle some time ago, actually in Monaco. It was an event organized by Nathalie. And we really connected. And I think now we are connected online, but then the first time we connected in person, Giselle, and it's a really pleasure to see you virtually today. Giselle, she's an interdisciplinary researcher. This is very needed nowadays in this type of themes. And also she is part of the group of the US Arctic Committee. So Giselle is very much working on different topics ranging from sustainability, climate change, bioeconomy, decarbonization. And then she has this very broad view, what I call it the planetary view on how we need to keep all this stability between atmosphere, ocean, and polar. Of course, this is very complex. We need to completely change mindset. As Nathalie said to us, we need to move from this model, which is harming us, the model based on extraction, and moving into a model based on regeneration. Obviously, this is easy to say, but difficult to do. So without further ado, Giselle, it's a pleasure to have you with us today, and you have the screen.
First of all, thank you very much for having me. Thank you very much for the invitation. Thank you for the organization of this great event. I'm going to share my screen now. I have a presentation, just a brief presentation. I hope you can see the presentation. Can you?
Now, yes.
Great. So it's a pleasure to debate about this topic that is so important and requires so much action. So my talk today is based on the latest book that was presented last week in Norway, and it's called Climate Adaptation and Green Finance. So the idea of this study was to develop the notion of a new carbon neutral economy, and to present methods for unlocking carbon finance and long-term climate change investment, not only in the Arctic region, but in non-Arctic region, because everything is absolutely interconnected. There is no reason for any fragmentation in terms of understanding. Another important element is the finance, but finance for resilient, sustainable investment structures. The importance of financial mechanisms in meeting the SDGs, so important for shaping our present and future societies. I would like to start with an overview, saying that climate change represents risk, an existential risk with exponential financial implications. The costs of inefficient systems or inactions are enormous. And my main point here is to advocate for a resource-efficient economy based on a clear sustainable finance strategy aligned to policy framework. So this should be the main elements of our action plan, global action plan. As Natalie and Reem said previously, there is plenty of evidence from IPCC. The synthesis report shows that human activities are causing emissions of greenhouse gases. We are at very dangerous thresholds now. We have a lack of wise practice in terms of energy use, land use, ocean use, lifestyles, patterns of consumption and production. There are severe impacts on atmosphere, ocean, cryosphere, and biosphere, and vulnerable communities who have historically contributed the least to current climate change are disproportionately affected. So every increment of global warming will intensify multiple and concurrent hazards. And it creates serious impacts, globally speaking. So limiting warming to 1.5 degrees centigrades will have a very positive impact, what we call overshoot, because if warming exceeds this specific threshold, this specific level, it could gradually be reduced again by achieving and sustaining net negative global CO2 emissions. So the overshoot entails adverse impacts, some irreversible, and additional risks for human and natural systems, all growing with the magnitude and duration of the overshoot. So there is a rapidly closing window of opportunity to secure a livable and sustainable future for all societies. Climate resilient development integrates adaptation and mitigation to advance sustainable development for all societies. But it depends on increased international cooperation, these joint forces, the access to adequate financial resources, and we have the choices now, and the choices and actions implemented in this decade will have impacts now and for thousands of years. We are talking about risks, the interaction of vulnerability, exposure, and hazard, but mainly we are talking about creating resilience that can be understood as the capacity of social, economic, and environmental systems to adapt, to cope with hazardous events or trends, responding or reorganizing in ways that the essential functions, identity, and structure can be maintained. As I said, there is this rapidly window of opportunity. And depending on the choices we make, there will be different scenarios, more positive scenarios. Of course, there will be opportunities missed, but more positive scenarios with outcomes that will lead to sustainable development pathways, intermediate scenarios, and catastrophic scenarios, depending on the choices we make now. By considering these fundamental attributes of natural and human systems, the interdependence of these systems, adaptation can be understood as the process of adjusting to actual or expected climate effects. We need to adapt. It's an urgent call. We need to moderate or avoid harm by benefiting from these opportunities that are open to us. And it's fundamental part of this balance towards more resilient systems. These adjustments in ecological, social, and economic systems, they are all concomitant adjustments. And we also need to provide changes in processes, practices, and structures to moderate potential damages. This will require engagement of all stakeholders. And then I think this is a very important concept of this presentation. Adaptation finance is finance for actions that help communities reduce the risks they face and harm they might suffer from climate hazards like extreme weather, extreme storms, droughts. So it pays for things like stronger housing, more drought-tolerant crops, social safety nets, improved decision-making around climate-related risks. So the importance of this concept resides in the fact that low-income countries depend on external finance from governments, private sector, development, and developing nations to supply these adaptation needs. To create infrastructure, resilient infrastructure, to create ecosystems conservation and restoration in their local contexts. In face of these key concepts that I mentioned, adaptation finance has currently gained more attention to have the level of investment necessary to address risk, vulnerability, exposure, and create resilience. These initiatives represent the coordination of shared competence and action for risk assessment and management, covering emergency preparedness based on modern operational management systems and contingency practices to engage stakeholders to identify, manage, and prevent risks by building risk knowledge and collective resilience informed by knowledge, innovation, technology, and education. So the important part is to understand leadership in all this context, leadership in adaptation, finance, and investment, identifying these initiatives of low carbon and energy efficient systems and investments, recognizing the role of finance in the context of this low carbon economy, how some institutions are allocating capital and steering financial flows towards more low carbon climate resilient activities, and the steps to change corporate behavior, influence policy outcomes, and build the data, the tools, the transparency, and embed climate change into the market functions, according to proactive and sponsored measures to tackle vulnerability and create resilience. Financial institutions identified their role in adaptation and resilience finance through strategies, and they are providing their expertise to support new business models, analytics, geographical exposure and vulnerability assessments, geographical operations oriented to local, regional, and global resilience. So, in my opinion, the implementation of this strategic financial role in climate change adaptation entails a massive alignment of goals, actions, policies, sector-specific practices, channels of financial resources, economic strategic planning, science-based data, and future thinking scenario planning, and of course, decision-making. In terms of the alignment of these financial tools, the integration of coastal conservation and restoration into banking operations can happen by issuance of blue bonds, for example, inspired on the experience of the previous green bonds for biodiversity and sustainable land use, which will contribute to coastal wetland conservation, restoration activities, and the evaluation of metrics of blended finance structures. So this alignment of financial tools, corporate goals with science-based targets is another crucial role of businesses in mitigating and adapting climate change. Co-management of blue carbon ecosystems is a very important tool, a managerial tool that can enhance food security, livelihoods, resilience, and contribute to delivering nationally determined contributions through carbon sequestration and adaptation. Coastal communities should play an active role in this process, in project design, in implementation, expertise, using their local knowledge to help assess existing management practices, in building scientific capacity. When local communities act as users and stewards to ensure the success and sustainability of blue carbon management, the results tend to be more significant and in terms of protection and social environmental outcomes. So community-based management is a very important, invaluable tool, and proved to be very effective for blue carbon projects in mangroves in several parts of Asia. So this project conserves and restores the mangrove ecosystems. At the same time, it supports economic activities. Communities impacted by the misuse of natural resources needed to be involved to help find and agree upon sustainable solutions. So they needed to be part of the solutions. Several relevant points for the exchange between traditional knowledge, science, policymaking include ecological knowledge, wildlife biology, environmental management, ecosystems management, climate change impacts, weather variability, biodiversity conservation. So this is what interdisciplinary research means, to translate information from one system to the other, from the science to the policymaking, from traditional knowledge to management systems. So this is what precisely I find quite important, because vulnerable areas should develop this interdisciplinarity as well, and join forces in sharing experience, in implementing community-based conservation and adaptation. Mobilizing private climate finance is needed.
Giselle, if you could summarize, because we need...
Yes, it's for sure. So mobilizing private climate finance is needed to address climate change, because public finance alone will not be enough. So in order to get to an end, I would also suggest sustainability-linked finance instruments that are extremely important. It's important to see what multilateral funds are doing, bilateral funds and national funds are doing all over the world in very vulnerable societies, like in the Caribbean, in the Maldives, in the Pacific. There are several important initiatives. And I just would like to emphasize in this conclusion that transforming the world economy from the current levels of carbon footprint to a net zero emission economy requires government, industry, civil society to converge, and to understand the trade-offs, as Natalie mentioned, between economic growth and social environmental impacts. So thank you very much. And I'm very happy to debate later on.
Thank you very much, Giselle, for giving this broad view on what should be done. And of course, this is very interesting from a, I would say, theoretical standpoint. This is what we would like to achieve. But then, of course, when you go on to the practice, one has to really go on the ground and see what are the challenges, what are the opportunities, and what can be done based on the systems that we are that are already there developed. So they cannot be going on the opposite of what is there already, and I think for what you mentioned, of course, what is important here is to have now a pragmatic approach, in the sense that we need to understand how we are going to go there. So an action plan, rather than now, going and dwelling into what needs to be done, because everybody practically knows, but then changing the incentives is essential to ensure that this is moving to the right direction, to the direction we would like. And changing incentives in an economic system is not easy. So of course, there are the SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals of 2030. We are 2024, 6 years only left, and we are not accomplishing, or I would say, complying with the SDGs targets. Maybe we are talking about post-SDGs, but then post-SDGs, then we just are saying all globally that we're moving to eventually another 10 or 20 years just to kick the can. Say this is very well-known approach, to kick the can until, having the problem on the throat, and then when we have the problem on the throat, then the costs are extremely high, not only financial costs, but also human costs, and also infrastructure costs. So this is how we learn, probably, and it's the way forward, but this is not what we want to do. But thank you very much for reminding us the frameworks, and hopefully we will move forward with some clear action plans. So we also, today, we have the pleasure to have with us Marcus Mueller. So we're moving now to the private sector. So both of you, you mentioned the role of private sector nowadays. Everybody eyes is on the private sector. What the private sector can do, while the system has not changed. I sometimes wonder whether this is an approach simply to send the ball, it's a match ball between the public and the private sector. And at the end, we are just sending the ball to the private sector because simply the public sector failed to do what they are supposed to do. So now come on, private sector, come in and let's do the job. You do the job. And then with much less profit because the systems are not eventually adapted for these changes. So I have really the pleasure to introduce Marcus Mueller. Marcus, he is the Chief Investment Officer, ESG. So I remind ESG to whoever do not know what ESG is. It's environment, social, and governance. This is a concept that we would like to push forward globally, ESG, but then you can tell us where we are in that sense. And he's also the global head of Chief Investment Office of Dutch Bank, which Dutch Bank is a very important a private bank, global private bank. So Marcus, I send you the ball to give us what the private sector is doing. What do you see all this debate on the blue carbon, and how do you see the future?
Thank you very much for having me, and also greetings from my side here from Frankfurt, from our headquarters of Deutsche Bank. It is really a difficult question you gave to me, and I have really to agree to what Natalie said, but also what Giselle said. And nonetheless, we are now here at this point and asking again, as during the last years, the question, how can we unleash this power? And maybe the ones who know me, I'm an economist by training, and let me really try to explain, and I have no slides with me because I think everything has been said. I try to explain this really very pragmatic on how I see this from a bank perspective, capital market perspective, private sector perspective, but also as an economist. And I would like to reroute your direction to someone we maybe have forgotten, and her name is Elinor Ostrom. And Elinor Ostrom has conducted some studies for her work on the functioning, the mechanism of institutions. And it's already many, many years ago, even before Garrett Harding had said that we face more or less the problem of the commons. But even before this, Elinor Ostrom did find out that this is not the tragedy of the commons, it is rather the problem of the governance of the commons. And what we are facing with the natural degradation especially, it is really that our institutions we have designed are not designed in order to take nature into our economic decision-making process. And what Elinor Ostrom did was, after different array of studies, she more or less found out that small and medium-sized policy departments perform more effectively and more frequently at lower cost than large policy departments serving similar issues. Why? We have a problem of incentives. And I think this is exactly what we right now have discussed in the context of the European election and the context of the Green Deal. The idea of the Green Deal was right. The question of how implementing it and setting the right incentives that the private sector is moving in this direction, we maybe have to review. Because if you have an overarching, very powerful institutional arrangement, the smallest institution will not very likely move faster. If you have everything on the local level without a common sense in which direction you have to move, you might not reach your goal. So you have to find an optimum design between overarching broader institutions and local institutions. And Elinor Ostrom called this polycentric. And I think this is now a huge opportunity we face in Europe after the election, exactly to make Europe, with also focus on the Mediterranean, but also as one of the big blocs in the world, really an example in how to transform an economy without putting our economic prosperity, our social development at risk. And this is something which is really very, very important to bear in mind. And let me explain very briefly what polycentric means now here in detail. It connotes many centers of decision-making which are formally independent of each other, to the extent that they take each other into account, into competitive relationships, and enter into various contractual and cooperative undertakings, or have resource to central mechanism to resolve conflict. So the central institutions, be it in this example, for instance, the European Union or our governmental institutions, are a center point of resource to enable then the smaller institutions to move in the direction. And I really also liked what Giselle said on the importance of local communities, because the idea of including local communities is exactly this, to have a polycentric approach in place. And if I now think about corporates, big corporates, small corporates, then this is the same. A corporate is an institution, a kind of institutional arrangement in the private sector, yes, but it is a set of incentives in order to fulfill a dedicated goal, to deliver business outcome. And if the overarching institution is not giving enough room for this small corporation to develop, it is not a miracle to understand, or not a miracle is needed to understand, that the outcome out of this smaller cooperation will be inferior to the optimum. And this is something what we importantly have to bear in mind, because if we look at the Fortune 500, for example, from the 90s, so the biggest important companies, 500 companies in the world in the 90s, and if we compare them from the 90s to today, just 34 companies out of those have been disappeared from this planet. 17 are new, the rest are the same. So that means that a transformation in an economic activity always happens through the existing market structure, through the incumbents. And this is something what we have to positively to incentivize in order to move. Usually incumbents or companies are doing this automatically as a reaction function to a change in economic reality, usually. But now we have a limitation in front of us, a physical limitation given by the carbon budget, given by nature limitations and what we have done with nature and with our atmosphere. Now we need an activation of incentives that they move not automatically, that they move proactively. And this is something which is very important. So the future starts in the existing market demand structure and not in new business models which will just unfold in 10 years. It is important that we develop new business models. But again, we have to start today in our existing institutional arrangement, adjusted in a way that the smallest entity can move by itself under the given direction of the global, of the broader or bigger institution, without really paternalizing them, without telling them what they have to do, rather finding in their limited room the unlimited possibilities of development. And let me bring it now a little bit more concrete to how finance and economics play here. It is important that we always have to define a goal. And for each goal, we have to define then the tool. And this is Gotthard's law. This is something what we economists know from the more or less a second semester at university, right? That to each goal, we have an appropriate tool. And if a measure becomes a goal, the system is very likely to fail to reach the goal. So this is something which is also important. So finance by itself is not a goal. Finance is a tool. Hence, I'm always skeptical about the mysterious finance gap, blue finance gap, SDG 14, underfunded, etc. But if we are honest to ourselves, we do not need more money. We need just to reroute the money which goes in the harmful activities towards the neutral or nature positive activities. And this is through the incumbents and through a supportive policy instead of a limitation policy. And when we are then able to define the goals and the respective tools in the respective polycentric institutional arrangement, corporates, the real economy, will find economic benefit. If you think about the shipping sector as an example, also in the context of the Mediterranean, what do we do with the shipping sector? So very simple. A vessel is on this planet, functions on this planet 25 to 30 years. We won't be able from today to tomorrow to completely overhaul all vessels. But what we can do is we can build kind of green shipping corridors where we include the entire value chain of the shipping sector and support them in their transformation step by step towards the direction of being carbon emission or greenhouse gas emission neutral. But being clear about the fact that given the structure of this market and given the structure of shipping, we won't be able to do this in one step. Transformation doesn't happen from 0 to 1. It happens from 0,1, 0,112, 0,2 towards the number one. So it's really an incremental step-by-step approach. Blue bonds, green bonds, sustainable linked bonds, great solutions, really great solutions, great tools for fulfilling a goal. But just when you have an economic profit angle attached to it, because otherwise you won't find a buyer at the market, because you need to deliver a return. If you have a common like biodiversity or like a marine protected area, this is very difficult to articulate an economic return. So the public market might be not the right place to finance this, this protection area, etc. Here we have to look to governments and tell them what kind of important risk is attached to it if this marine protected area, for instance, is not put under protection because of further shrinking fish stock and then a risk exposed to local community attached to this fish stock available or then not anymore available. And then we have constructions in between where we have the need for public finance through capital markets, but also kind of concessional capital provided by governments or multilateral institutions. This is then the so-called blended finance instrument box, which we then can use. But again, for all these three different kinds of instruments, we always have defined a different goal to reach. And last but not least, the question around how fast can this happen? And I say it's already on the way. We are already transforming, and we see even in the discussion and scrutiny around sustainability, we see in the real world already that corporates have understood that sustainability means being more diligent in risk management, because if I have a diversified value chain, I'm far more independent from a risk exposed to my value chain. If I make a prudent resource management, I have potentially lower cost. And this is something which is in the end sustainability. Sustainability is being completely clear about my dependencies and trying to find a way to reduce my dependencies in order to become more effective and efficient under the usage of the available finance instruments in a dedicated designed institutional framework which is supportive and polycentric. And then I could now bring up many, many slides of many, many examples, what has already happened in this context. But let me finish. Again, finance and economics is a tool and not a goal. Secondly, it is not about limitation through policy. It is about incentivization through policy that change is happening. And the policy arrangement must be a polycentric policy which gives direction, but gives accountability to the smallest unit in the system in order to move into the goals we have defined at point number one. So I hope I could clarify a little bit my thoughts, and maybe it was a little bit differently expected what an economist, the representation of a bank, is representing. But in the end, you know, we are in the middle, we are intermediaries, and we give solutions, tools to the one or the other side. But important is that they tell us the right information in order that we can provide the tool to fulfill the goal. And my observation, what I've just described, was the observation of the last years. And I think we need to stop educating ourselves why it's needed, rather now thinking how we get it done. And this is also my wish for the upcoming climate conference and for all conferences of the parties. Not more goals, not more actions. Really, we need to get our promises we've articulated already implemented. And then I think we will have a better future than if we stand still and do nothing. Thank you very much.
Marcus, thank you very much. This is very much aligned with, of course, it's an incentive issue, which is not yet, I'll say, adapted to our goals, unfortunately. And I think as economists, as finance professionals, as scientists overall in different disciplines, we are all frustrated because of this lag or lack of aligning the incentives to our goals, because we do not agree that this is our common goal yet. So this is the problem we have globally. Of course, Europe has agreed, which is great. That's a Green Deal. But at the same time, of course, finance, I absolutely agree, is a tool, and we need to, as you said, your words, to reroute money into where it should be, where the goal is. But then at the same time, we are in a global, I would say, setting. So you have different organizations, and I'm not talking about the financial sector per se, but they are all competing with each other globally. So then there is the whole mantra, I'll call it, of the level playing field. And these are mantras which most probably we need to not only rethink, but also to put under rest completely. And then think, how can we reach collectively and in a collaborative way the goal we are setting? And these are, I assume, the role of all these events, global event, COPs and companies that we are, aware of. I like very much what you said. We need to move into a nature positive economy. Thank you for this. This is really essential to me. And of course, we're not saying that there is no return to be delivered, but we need to find, or we need to ensure that innovation is allowing us to have this return over time. And I think the science, it's there. So it's not like we are deprived of science. We have science that allow us to move into innovation and have innovative ideas to be able to do that. And I agree with you. I mean, pushing finance to finance whatever without appropriate risk management, risk assessment, and return. This is the biggest mistake. And maybe we might solve certain quantitative targets, but then we will create big issues on financial stability. Yeah. So these are also trade-offs that one has to be very careful with. Thank you very much for bringing this. Now I move without further ado, because I see the time running. I'd like to give the floor now to our colleague Thorsten Thiel. He is the founder of Global Ocean Trust. He is also a senior advisor of the Blue Carbon Accelerator. And Thorsten, he is member of the advisory board of Euro-Mediterranean Economists Association. So great to see you virtually here, Thorsten. You heard from what Natalie said, Giselle and Marcus. What is your view from all the work you've been doing and have discussed? I think there are opportunities, but how do you see it from your perspective, Thorsten?
Thank you very much, and it's a great pleasure to be here with everyone. I will share my screen so that I can walk you to what I would think of as a practical way on how we can actually progress. And I will play this in big screen. So as we talk about blue carbon frontiers, what we're really talking about is how we transition the Mediterranean to a sustainable and regenerative blue economy, which means, as you know, reducing stresses on the marine environment, conserving ecosystems, allowing biodiversity recovery, and addressing ocean and climate risks through resilience and nature-based solutions. And a key part of that is the restoration of blue natural capital. But it also includes the investment in the knowledge, the energy, the water solutions, the bioeconomy. And we've recently published an ocean panel paper which shows that a third of climate solutions can come from that blue space. So what are we talking about in the Mediterranean? We have one of the most amazing blue natural capital assets in the shape of the seagrass beds. Here is shown the distribution of Posidonia oceanica. And I think this is a very relevant starting point on how we can actually approach the Mediterranean as a blue natural capital asset and as an investable opportunity around nature finance. So obviously, in order to value blue natural capital, in order to make it an investment class, we need to have the right accounting approaches and impact assessment approaches. And we recently published a whole blue carbon handbook on how such nature-based solutions can work. But these opportunities deliver much more than carbon. They are all about the co-benefits in fish recovery, in resilience, in biodiversity, in water quality. And the good news is that there's a lot of work that has gone on in the Mediterranean context already. There is the work that IUCN has done around blue carbon projects there. There's a whole work led by WWF around restoring wetlands. And there's, of course, the French-led efforts around Posidonia and the Posidonia network. So we don't start from zero. We have got a lot of science, a lot of relevant starting points for this kind of new natural capital assets approach. And with IUCN, we built the Blue Carbon Accelerator Fund and the Blue Natural Capital Financing Facility to test some of these concepts. And we've taken this to multiple places to identify how on a specific project level, an investment in this type of natural capital, if it's structured in a way that it delivers multiple outcomes, multiple revenue streams, can lead to additional private investment as well as public benefits. So there's a whole range of principles and approaches for this that have been developed, ranging from the Global Ocean Accounting Partnership to the high-quality blue carbon principles. We have carbon removal certification frameworks from the EU with the IC, the World Bank, and I mentioned IUCN already. So a lot of work has gone on. There is a framework and a format, and now I think the great opportunity for the Mediterranean is to apply this consistently throughout. This is all about considering nature as part of blue infrastructure, of using innovation around nature-based solutions and regeneration, and using also the tools that we already have, for instance, through multilateral development banks. Just to give one example, a whole group of development finance institutions have committed themselves last year to an Ocean Action Declaration. They are focusing on these solutions and could be the right vehicles to coordinate the funding that then needs to go into the individual projects. And they're obviously also the right entities that could raise large-scale capital because they're very active in the capital markets already. And so a Mediterranean seagrass blue bond, just to mention an example, could be in the cards for these types of solutions. And we have, through Aura, the Sea Change Impact Finance Facility, another way to blend large-scale private action with ocean solutions on the ground focused on blue natural capital. So what does that mean? It means that we are looking to put in place robust measures that actually protect these remaining large seagrass ecosystem. And there are multiple assessments, but one number, just to give people an idea, is that the value of carbon stock we're talking about is in the range of 150 billion. So we need to keep, protect, and restore these ecosystems. They are a critical blue natural capital assets, and they can be serving as a cornerstone to develop a much broader sustainable and regenerative blue economy across the entire Mediterranean, starting with these pilot points where already we have incredible seagrass. I recently had the opportunity to visit Tunisia and the amazing tiger Posidonia beds there. These are key for nature, and they are key for future nature-aligned development. And so that means we need blue finance approaches that are based around public and private partnerships and blended finance, have appropriate risk transfer metrics and monitoring in place, And that will allow us to deliver fundings required from Tunisia to Albania, from Andalusia to Turkey, from Greece, where we just had the recent Our Ocean Conference, to Nice, where, of course, the UN Ocean Conference takes place next year. And so one idea around this would be to create what I would call the Mediterranean Posidonia Investment Pool, a financial pool that would allow the support into these individual projects. These individual projects will deliver all these benefits, and we are engaging this way into a narrative for the Mediterranean that is net zero and nature positive. Thank you very much.
Thorsten, thank you very much for the precision of your account and your presentation. I think this is very clear. Things are being thought and developed. And I think these are, of course, although the challenges are huge, but then I think the financial market has the solutions to innovate. And this is properly I would say, an innovation that comes from the whole debate about the nature capital that is even going beyond the blue nature capital or nature blue asset, blue natural capital asset. Okay, so there is also the whole debate on the green side, which of course can be very much aligned to this. You mentioned something really important, which is the counting. Natural capital accounting. And I think this is essential to ensure that the value of the natural resources, whatever those are, and ecosystem services, into the accounting system, the national accounting systems. So my question to you, do you see any progress in this? And how do you see it going forward to move what you're saying into implementation and upscaling?
Yes, I see significant progress in that space right now. If you look at the way the US is starting to implement that type of accounting, you see the European initiatives, you see what Australia is doing in wetlands, and the Global Ocean Accounts Partnership is really a way where these different concepts are being brought together. And I think it is two key aspects. One is that it correctly reflects the nature asset value, but it also needs to be fully integrated into more traditional accounting frameworks. And it's that work, but we've just seen it with TFND as another format that allows nature-based disclosure. We are speaking to TFND to make sure that more ocean components are integrated. So this is very much a live topic, and it's happening as we speak. And I think it behooves us as Mediterranean states to use the Mediterranean as that laboratory where we deploy these ideas, bring it into fruition, and use the UN Ocean Conference next year to show that the Mediterranean can lead on this front.
Thank you. This is all clear, and for sure we need to continue moving forward and pushing the ship, although it's a heavy ship, but I assume that there is enough, I would say, innovation and technology to move it even in a green manner. So, I mean, in a clean manner, I would say, rather than the green and clean. So thank you very much for this, and really it gives me hope, Thorsten, when I listen to you. I mean, but I guess we need to continue hoping for the best and preparing for the worst, and that's practically what all we have to do. Our next speaker is Patricia Bussolini. She is from the UN UNEP, coordinating unit of the Mediterranean Action Plan of the UN. And she is a socioeconomic and sustainable development officer. We have the pleasure to collaborate with the UN MAP, and all the greetings to Tatiana Hema, who is not only our friend, but also our close collaborator. I think we are all sharing the same concerns within the region. And I'm very happy to have you with us today to discuss your plans based on what we heard. And of course, what we are interested in, it's in the acceleration for having those funds. I mean, I had the chance to go to Montenegro and discussed how we can accelerate, financing. But my problem is completely aligned with what we heard, incentives. What are the incentives and all of that? So please, Patricia, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Professor Rimi. Good afternoon to all the speakers and all participants. I'm very pleased to be here with you to this seminar and contributing on behalf of UNEP MAP coordinator Tatiana Ema, who she sends her greetings. Unfortunately, at the last moment, she had a commitment and she could not take part. I'm very happy also to contribute by providing some complementary perspective to those that we have listened so far, by letting you know what we are doing at UNEP MAP most recently. In particular, when it comes to fighting the climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution challenges, which were the main objectives of a ambitious ministerial declaration that was endorsed during the COP23, which took place in December 23 in Slovenia. And this was adopted under a motto, green transition in the Mediterranean from decisions to actions. So this is really in line with what we have discussed until now. We need really to act. During the COP23, the contracting party took really stock of the status of the Mediterranean coastal and maritime environment. And this was also thanks to the immense collective work that have been consolidated into a document which is called Mediterranean Quality Status Report 2023, which has been the result of 7 years of monitoring and assessment of environmental quality ensured data. And I would like to give you the main elements of this quality status report when it comes to the discussion that we are having today. The main message is really that we need to accelerate the pathway towards green transition, and this is really evident when it comes to climate change, and it's evident also from a number of other reports, one of the main ones, it is the MEDEC report, which is the Mediterranean Network of Climate Change Experts. When it comes, I would also like to let you know that during the COP23, the contracting parties to the Barcelona Convention also endorsed the decision to set up a new regional activity center of climate change. This will be based in Turkey. And this demonstrates really a concrete vision and swift action from the Barcelona Convention contracting parties. And this, of course, this regional activity center will complement what the current regional activity center already contribute to climate change approach of UNEP MAP. But I would like now to give you some more concrete elements on the Med Quality Status Report 2023, which are relevant to this discussion. In particular, what it has been one of the main messages, it is that the assessment of the ecological status regarding climate change should give the ability to identify which are the vulnerable areas and ecosystems regarding climate change impacts, and where resilience could be increased by addressing local impacts and implementing nature-based solutions. Also, some ecosystems, it is evident that some ecosystems has the faculty of mitigating climate change impacts. This is, for example, the case for wetlands, woods, forests, dunes, that are really at the interface from land and the sea, and they have an important nature-based solution role when it comes to facing climate change impact. And also what it would be important, it is to better integrate coastal terrestrial ecosystem by acquiring both at national and sub-regional level, further precise data, quality ensured data on ecosystems, those ecosystems that has the ability to mitigate climate change impact, as I have already mentioned. Also to the same aim, also the effects of climate change on the seabed and its communities also need to be better understood. Of particular importance, it is, for example, the assessment of the carbon storage capacity of marine habitats, the contribution of this mix, of how this makes to migration of climate change effects, the importance of shallow vegetated habitats such as the Posidonia oceania meadows. This is very important. And the related carbon sequestration capacity. So there is, let's say that there is an important knowledge gap that UNEP map through this Mediterranean quality status report has identified and is willing to work on. Because as we have said also earlier, having the data, the quality ensured data will also allow to develop messages towards the policy level, clear messages towards the policy level that will allow the policy level also to take decisions when it comes to financial investments, which of course need also to be matched with private also investments. Also, what it is important to mention, it is that during the COP23, it has also been endorsed the will to go towards an updated, a renewed ecosystem approach policy of the UNEP map, therefore covering all the Mediterranean. That includes climate change and ocean acidification as a new theme of this ecosystem approach. This is very important because it means that really at policy level, the contracting parties of the Barcelona Convention, which includes the European Commission, really take stock of this issue that needs to be tackled. In the same line, also, it is important to define a new set of common indicators for when it comes to monitoring climate change. This is very important. For example, monitoring hydrographic parameters as salinity, temperature, waves, currents, and so forth. Now, in complement to quality assured data, climate change linked parameters, common indicator, and so forth that are very useful to understand, to monitor, and then therefore understand which is the situation, and based on that, take decision, including financial and investment ones. It is also very important to be able to rely on regional strategic approach, regional strategic framework, in order to allow to have a coherent approach at regional, not only national, but also at regional level, and to support, promote measures that improve marine ecosystem health, resilience, biodiversity. At the end of the day, as it has already been said earlier, also the human life, because this is what also we are talking about. And what it is important, as the speaker before my contribution said, this is also very much linked also to sustainable blue economy. Sustainable like fishing practices, reducing pollution from agricultural activities, sustainable tourism, waste management, and so forth. Not to mention the mining and so forth, other such kind of blue economy activities. Continuing on the topic of regional strategic approach, since 2017, UNEP map has also developed a regional climate change adaptation framework for Mediterranean marine and coastal areas. Why am I mentioning this? I am mentioning this because in the next year, we will update this framework. A framework that now focuses institutional and policy framework, focuses the development of best practices and pilot activities. It focuses access to existing and emerging finance mechanisms and availability and use of reliable data and information and tools. This is very important. So we are going next year to update this framework. And for sure, the will is to integrate all these elements that we are discussing also here today. So blue carbon, blue finance, and so forth. Of course, also coordinating with the most relevant initiative actors in the region, in the Mediterranean. So this updated framework will address potential thematic gaps, will also integrate an action plan and cost estimation for resource mobilization. So this is very linked to what you are mentioning. We are willing to add local adaptation pilots, and we are willing also to reinforce the framework for monitoring and evaluation system with indicators and targets. Now, as we have said, sustainable development in the Mediterranean, it's and fighting, adapting to climate change cannot be decoupled. These are the same as these are two sides of the same aspect, let's say. To this same, this regional climate adaptation framework goes hand in hand with the Mediterranean strategy for sustainable development. Again, why I'm mentioning this? Because this Mediterranean strategy for sustainable development, it is a 10 years framework that we will update also this framework in the next year. The two frameworks go hand in hand. And this Mediterranean for Sustainable Development, it has a number of objectives, including climate change, including blue economy and green economy. So we need now to see how we need to update this framework, again, with blue and green financing, with additional flagship initiatives that are, let's say, the implementing arm of this strategy. One of these flagship initiatives that I want to mention that is very relevant to our discussion, it is a Poseidonia flagship initiative, which is led by France. So I'm very happy for the previous colleague that spoke about this Med Poseidonia investment pool, the Blue Carbon Acceleration Fund, and so forth, because I think here really we do have the elements to cooperate and to see how different initiatives on the same topic can become a bit more synergic. Because also, as we said, the colleague from the Deutsche Bank, the money is there. We do have the money. It's just a matter a bit to align things and to reroute the investments and the financial tool. It's not an easy task, of course, but indeed we have heard in many events, in many regional events at Mediterranean level, and not only that, the money are there. It's a matter to align them somehow in a different way. Now, what is also important, it is to have the right set of economic tools to support the green and blue innovation and policies. What does this mean? This means moving away from environmental harmful subsidies, which that favor the expansion of economic activity at the expenses of conservation and restoration. On the global scale, the environmental harmful subsidies are estimated to be 5 to 6 times higher than those that benefit the environment. And in particular, in the Mediterranean region, the situation vary. For example, some other on fishing sites or energy security and so on. So here there is really a lot of work that needs to be done. There is a lot of work that needs to be done in terms of coordination at national, but also at regional level. There is a lot of work to be done in terms of polycentric coordination, as it was said earlier. This also means shifting towards leveraging green public finance and green economic tools as strategic instruments. These tools that really need to be part of responsible decision making. This is why it is important to have data in order to inform the policymakers with data. It is to say science policy interface, which was mentioned earlier. Again, it is very important also to in the same line to go towards environmental taxations. In fact, there is important work at UNEP-MAP. There is the Regional Activity Center Plan Bleu, which is working a lot on green taxonomy, on environmental taxations, and so forth, because this is a key aspect. and that and Plan Bleu will deliver a report by the end of 2025. There is a colleague from Plan Bleu online here. I'm very happy he's here. And to conclude, what I would like to mention, it is that UNEP map has developed, and it is also further investing, as you can have understood, on integrated approaches, measures, and decisions in order really to efficiently tackle climate change, because this issue needs really to be tackled from different angles, from different perspectives. What is important, it is again the polycentric approach. It is to consider is it that it is a shared challenge that requires policy vision, reinforced multilateral cooperation mechanisms, specific financial mechanisms, and multi-level stakeholder engagement. Voila. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Patricia, for your sharing what you are doing at the UNEP. And I'm sure you will certainly contribute to all this accelerated transition that as we talk. Of course, every stakeholder has the responsibility to do its bit. And I think we are all gathered here, scientists, academics, finance, policy, to find ways to accelerate this transition, not to have the throat on our necks. I think this is, and especially the Mediterranean is a hotspot. And you mentioned the MEDEC, in which also Nathalie has been part of as one of the authors of this paper. This paper has been published years ago already. So I see the time running, and my colleagues are pressing me. I'm not doing great today in the moderation. I think everybody has a lot to say. Our last speaker is Sarah Alimi. Sarah, she's a PhD candidate and at the Ascoli University of Venice School of Management. And she's a researcher at the Fondazione EMEA. EMEA is Enrico Mattei. So, Sarah, minding please the time, because we need to, if possible, have one question to whoever is left from the panelists. Just give me your view, particularly in terms of how we can transit fast, also using the system that we have nowadays. And how do you see this based on the research that you are undertaking, not only in your PhD, but also at the Fondazione Enrico Mattei?
Yeah, so thank you for the invitation. I will be sharing my screen as I have a presentation which will support. Okay, I hope you can see my screen. Yes, I will be bringing on the table of this discussion one specific instrument that may be useful to serve some of the objectives that the other expert before me already mentioned in our aim to achieve less emission in the atmosphere and a more positive impact on the environment, which are blue credits and blue offsets. So I will start very briefly saying what they are. We know them already, as there are carbon markets already existing. They are both compliance markets, so mandatory market, but there is also the possibility to participate in voluntary carbon markets. And what happens? So what we can do? We can balance our impact on the environment by offsetting our emission if they are not anymore. If it's not possible to reduce them, by buying some credits that grant us that these emissions are somewhere else, close or far from us, depending on the scheme we are participating, being offset. And how does it work? As the expert before me were saying, one thing that we can do is protecting and restoring the ecosystems. And this is the basis for this project to be developed. So we can set up a project, restore and protect the ecosystem, and in this way we can capture the CO2. So this capturing of the CO2 should be verified. And through standard and certification, we can measure and verify and grant that these carbon sinks are real. And once this has been verified through standard, we can put on the market some credits. This credit can be bought by participants, and through this mechanism, we obtain some revenue. This revenue can be used to fund conservation projects, and again, to achieve a good state, a healthy environment. So in this life cycle, a lot of players participate, and we know this mechanism because it's already existing not for the blue market, is not so developed, but it's already existing for the terrestrial ecosystem. So if we look specifically at voluntary markets, we see that in the last decades and a little bit more, green terrestrial carbon projects have been developed a lot, with an average of plus 33% per annum. Looking at the blue carbon project, instead, we see that they are not as much developed. Also, if we look at the average size of credits within the project, blue carbon projects are smaller in size because of their development, actually. The fact that they are not so much developed, it doesn't mean that they do not have a potential. Scientists before me, an expert, already mentioned which are the ecosystem services that can serve this activity, that can serve as carbon sink. Very often we heard about mangroves, but there are other type of ecosystems that can help us in this activity. Seagrasses for the Mediterranean has already been mentioned as an element with great potential. And indeed, from this graph, we can see that their opportunity to store CO2 is huge, also in comparison with other natural elements, and it also has potential on long term. Specifically, someone already mentioned Posidonia oceanica as one natural element that Mediterranean area can leverage on. So this potential of absorbing CO2 has been measured and has also been assessed in terms of cost. Some study prove that the blue carbon solutions are indeed cost competitive with terrestrial solution. When we want to restore the ecosystem and take care of the ecosystem, there are clearly some costs to bear. And this graph shows us that blue solution can be an option too. And how do we cover these costs? So there is the first benefit of taking care of the environment and re-establish the quality of blue ecosystem, which is per se an advantage. And then by taking care of this environment, we also achieve a second benefit, which is develop this environment as sinks for CO2. By exploiting somehow this potential of storing CO2, we can create, and I back to the first slide where I was just briefly explaining you the carbon cycle, the life cycle of blue offset. So by recognizing the offset, we can sell this on the market and obtain some money, some revenue to be used in the restoration and conservation projects. not only we have to consider that there are these two first benefits. One is restoring and conserving itself the ecosystems, and the second one is capturing CO2. But these payment of ecosystems like project may also give rise to co-benefits. These co-benefits, I just mentioned some, but I know that someone else before me already mentioned. This can be a recreation, so there's a benefit also in terms of tourism. There is the coastal protection co-benefit, which is a benefit for the local community that can participate in this project, as restoring coastal ecosystems can serve to protect community from extreme events too. And also we obtain benefits for the fishery sector too, because having an healthy ecosystem is clearly a benefit also for the local fauna and biodiversity. So we know that there are a lot of advantages in developing this instrument, but nowadays, as we saw at the beginning of this presentation, it's more the terrestrial environment which is used as an element to offset carbon emission. So in order to go also on the other side and use the blue carbon environment to give rise to this offset, for sure, we need to identify which are the opportunity, and as already been said, that lots of studies and organizations are trying to assess the potential for blue carbon ecosystems, and we need to find a more efficient way to let this data to be accessed by the parties which can be interested in participating into these projects. We need to select and validate which are the standards that we can use to certify that these projects, that the carbon sinks are happening. And also we need case study which proves that this can really be an instrument to be integrated into carbon market. Specifically, it can be integrated into voluntary carbon market, but we need to assess all the opportunity and how the framework of the policy framework can be integrated with these instruments. Someone else already mentioned this report. I wanted just to bring the attention on this manual that has been developed, which give great guidelines on how this carbon offset opportunity can be boosted, can be a real solution to many of the challenges of today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah, for this, I would say, nice description of what we have. And I think this is helpful to give an overall overview on what are the opportunities at stake. So please, I would like to ask all the speakers to put themselves on their camera on. We have 5 minutes for group discussion based on this very informative and insightful presentations from all of you. So if we can move to group picture, yes, fantastic, this is nice. Unfortunately, Gramenos Mastroianni, who is the Deputy Secretary General of the Union for Mediterranean, our co-organizer, also collaborator in this webinar, was not able to make it. He was caught with no connection in Algeria. So we are missing, in fact, what the Union for Mediterranean is doing to promote the blue carbon and all the financing of this area. But then listening to all of you, obviously, I can see the Mediterranean offering a lot of opportunities, which are opportunities for this carbon innovations that we see. But we are still, according to Thorsten, there is a lot of progress. According, of course, maybe I don't see Nathalie, yes, here. What do you think, Nathalie, based on what you heard from first Patricia, of course, Sarah, on the overall view that she provided, Thorsten and Marcus? I go back to you because, of course, you have followed this sector so much over the years. So how do you see, are we really progressing, and will we have the time to channel the appropriate financing and to change the incentives, as Marcus said? I absolutely agree with him, and to really make an impact also. And I have the impression sometimes that the policies are going much less aligned with what the market is doing, but then there should be an alignment sometime, because if the policies and the regulatory framework, they are not going aligned with market development, then we might run the risk that some of the market activities may not be compliant, and then they might even be not desirable. So how do you see this, Nathalie?
When I talk to my colleagues, biologists, we always consider that in the Mediterranean, the most important ecosystem is the Posidonia, that has been mentioned here several times. And the problem in the Mediterranean is collaboration between the different countries. And this is a big issue. When we talk about the Mediterranean, it is always interesting hotspot for biodiversity, but also for climate change. And it is an interesting economic part of the world to study, because we have the north, which has developed countries, the south and east with developing countries. So it is very important to motivate all those countries together to collaborate and to protect the Mediterranean and its ecosystems. And this needs maybe more incentives. So this is why I think it is important to motivate the collaboration between the different countries. This is my opinion, and maybe I let the floor to other people.
Thank you, Nathalie. Of course, collaboration is important, but again, I see of course, we are talking about the Mediterranean Sea and all the countries around the Mediterranean. Within the Union for the Mediterranean, they are all there supposedly to be collaborating for the goal that we would like to reach. And of course, normally we should have seen a lot of progress in the Mediterranean, specifically in this area, but unfortunately we are not seeing it. I mean, I look at Patricia, I look at the picture of Bremenos, but he's not there. Of course, we will have other opportunities to talk to him. But certainly, Patricia, how do you see the policies playing a role into accelerating within, for example, UN Mediterranean Action Plan? You mentioned the center, regional center that you mentioned. But you see, beyond assessments, I think we've seen so many reports all telling the same, okay? So assessment after assessment. But then what else? I mean, I have the impression that we are just writing papers and assessment, one after the other one, saying the same things with different wording. So are we going to continue with this, or really take decisive actions to provide what Marcus was saying before, the right incentives for the right goal and moving forward? And if the regional organizations and policies, they cannot do it, who can do it?
Thank you. Thank you for giving me again the floor. This is a very key question. Well, of course, UNEP is not the institution to provide fundings. But it is true, as I have mentioned, that, for example, with this updated regional framework on climate change, we are really planning to introduce concrete pilots in the different countries at regional levels to promote also this cooperation at regional level, also as it has been said by Nathalie. So regional pilots really, and we will also include, as I have mentioned, this action plan, how to mobilize resources in order to finance these pilot actions. So there is the policy, because we do need the policy, but there is also the activities, the concrete activities through, for example, concrete pilot actions. On the other side, as I have mentioned, very concretely, and because Nathalie was said that the Poseidonia is one of the most important in the Mediterranean, as I have mentioned, there is this new flagship initiative on Poseidonia meadows in the framework of the Mediterranean Strategy for Sustainable Development. This is led by France. This is led by Morocco. There is the Regional Activity Center on marine protected areas of the UNEP, which is based in Tunisia, the SPARAC, which leads this. So they are now in the phase of further developing the project, because I spoke yesterday with a colleague with SPARAC, because we need to further involve stakeholders, not only at governmental level, but we really need to involve other type of stakeholders, multi-level stakeholders. We need to involve the private sector. We need to involve the financial institutions. And this is where I would like to speak maybe with Thorsten in bilateral in another moment, because we have really something concrete. And this something concrete comes from the policy, but we have also concrete projects that potentially involve all the Mediterranean countries. So it goes towards what Nathalie raised, that there is a lack of cooperation, and we need to start from the existing and to push further the existing, because it will represent a good example, concrete example with concrete deliverables that the policymakers will make their own, because it worked, and it is easier then to sell it to also towards to financial institution for investments. So this is our idea for the time being, that can be replicated also in other fields. Now I am speaking about Poseidonia because we have a concrete project there, but it can be replicated, let's say.
Thank you, Patricia. I want to turn to Marcus. Marcus, do you think all these pilot projects are enough to upscale, to be upscaled for the tool, which is finance, to reach the goal that we want to reach?
So theoretically, yes. Sorry, there is a little bit of delay. So sorry that I cut in. Theoretically, I would say absolutely, but we are making here a little bit our decision without recognizing the system, how our economy is functioning. And this is a problem. So it is called an autopoiesic system. It is not like a watch, which you can fix from the outside. We can't just develop here something new and then substituting the old with the new. This is not working in the system we are living in. We need to change the system from the inside. Means what Patricia and also Thorsten and also Nathalie and everyone else said, what we have, the new project, these are projects where we can learn from, where we need to use the knowledge in order to bring then the knowledge back into the existing system, in order then to transform the system. New systems, new areas, which we are now developing, won't grow fast enough to solve the problem we are running into. Means we need to have this kind of acceleration phase and structure, doing something new on the side, but then providing our findings to the existing structure we are acting in. And this will make the change happen. If we wait for all the great projects taking off and substituting the existing economy, then I have to say, sorry, we won't make it.
Clear. Thorsten, what is your view? You are the optimistic of the panel today.
Thorsten is also German, right?
Yes.
I am very excited by this practical opportunity, which I think is exactly based on what Patricia was talking about, which is we take these Posidonia pilots and we have a broad pool across the Mediterranean that will channel funding to those places that are ready to go, that are willing to go. We did the same in the Baltic. We set up a Baltic Blue Bond, and that Baltic Blue Bond offered direct money to projects at the subnational and municipal level all around the Baltic. In that case, it was around waste water management, but this is a very similar financial structure we're talking about. And that was a very effective opportunity to raise a large amount of capital for one sea. And those countries and projects that wanted to run with it went for it. And obviously, if you are in a municipality in the developing end of the Mediterranean, if you don't have many other options, this will be particularly attractive to you. So we are guiding the money to where it's needed most, and we have an overall structure. And I think we started the Baltic discussion, and within 6 months, we had a financial instrument in place. So I am challenging everybody to work with me on this, to have it in place in 12 months, in time for the UN Ocean Conference in Nice.
Excellent.
Thank you. Thank you. Giselle, you heard everybody. What is your final comment as an academic and as having all the knowledge at the theoretical level? How do you see this going forward in 1 minute?
Okay, I think academics are not only theoretical. They understand the principles, and I tried to emphasize the principles today, but we also apply the principles. For example, there are several important case studies. I think our colleagues presented them. I agree with Marcus. The transformation needs to be structural, needs to be absolutely in terms of the functioning of the economy. But what the problem I see is, and now applying the theory into practice, is that people don't understand the benefits. People see the economic benefits, but they don't understand deeply the social benefits and the environmental benefits, because we are talking about food security, energy security, infrastructure security that everyone will presently and in the future will need all these elements. So the problem is in the principles. And as an academic that understand the principles, my role is to apply the principles into action as well. And there are several important case studies. I think that this is the most important contribution I can give. Several important notes I took from this talk. But I think investors, governments, stakeholders don't understand precisely the principle. And the principle is to understand the benefits, not only the economic benefits, but the social and the environmental ones. And there are cultural benefits as well. So I think this is an important element that needs to change.
And also, if you allow me also the health benefits for the human beings, because
exactly.
This is what we are talking also.
Thank you, Patricia, for raising this, because we are also working at EMEA together with Nathalie and others on the interaction between I would say everything related to climate change and consequences with human health, particularly mental and brain and mental health. This is quite important nowadays in the new interaction between really the planet and the people. Sarah, do you have any more comment to add based on this discussion, and how do you see this discussion contributing to your research?
So I see that many of the elements that the other expert mentioned can be useful in the development of the instrument that I talk about today. And so far as there are some case studies already activated in the Mediterranean area, I think that seeing the result of those would be a good start to scale up the instrument and these projects.
Thank you very much. I see the time coming and many of us will have to leave now. Thank you very, very much for this great discussion, starting with Nathalie, Giselle, Marcus, Torsten, Sarah, and Patricia. For sure, we will have other opportunities to see each other and to work together toward this common objective. So let's keep up with great work. And thank you very much to all for following and contributing to this webinar. Also, thank all the audience and the organizers for this for this session today. And the recording will be available online. It's already broadcasted live. A report will follow afterward to allow us to keep track of whatever we have said. So most probably we will meet again to see where we are in 1 year or so, and or maybe in COP if we are going to tackle these elements. So thank you very, very much for your time, and we see you soon, and have a very, very good afternoon and evening. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you very much.
Thank you to all. Bye-bye.